So you won't address this point, which refutes you. The refuse.
Going back to the argument of Jeremiah 31.
Yeah, I've already addressed it 5 times.
So I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I just want to have a discussion with you regarding Jesus and the fulfillment of the messianic prophecies.
Okay. What specifically?
So I just want to ask a few questions because I'm not really sure what sect of Christianity you are in. So I know you guys have different views. So
right. Well, I'm okay. Orthodox Christian, so Eastern Orthodox.
Okay, Eastern Orthodox. That's nice because my best friend's actually Eastern. So do you believe in the new covenant as mentioned in Jeremiah 31?
Yes.
And you believe that's been fulfilled or partially fulfilled or waiting to be fulfilled? Like, what do you believe it to be?
Well, we believe that at the first coming of the Messiah, he brought the reality of that new covenant that is characterizing our age. And then the fullness of that will be brought in at the eschaton. So it's a both and, yes.
Okay, so if we do have a discussion, I'm not sure if you do want to, but I'm just wondering if it's possible if we can stick to the Old Testament exclusively and just adhere to what the Old Testament says, if it's okay, right?
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, I know. Well, obviously, I understand you wouldn't accept the New Testament, so no, I don't have a problem with that.
Also, it's like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when Jesus says he's mentioned in the scriptures, that's not referring to the letters of Paul or Acts.
Of course.
That's referring to the 5 books of Moses and sure. Perhaps. So my contention with your interpretation regarding Jeremiah 31 is it like in verse 31 it mentions something that is quite fundamental in the whole sort of aspect of the future. Is it mentions the house of Israel and the house of Judah? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you're well aware how the house of Israel was expelled 800 or so years before Jesus, right? Give or take. So if you want to make the argument that it's been fulfilled within the time of Jesus, then how do you reconcile the fact that it mentions the house of Israel and the house of Judah when in reality they have not been restored? And this is evident within Jeremiah itself when he mentions in Jeremiah 30 verse 3 as well as 31 verse 10 as well as Zechariah and Ezekiel. They all mention the restoration of the house of Israel and the house of Judah.
Right, and I'm familiar with what you're saying with like Ezekiel talks about there will never be any more division, that the two will be joined back together, right?
Right, that's 36.
Yeah.
So obviously when the house of Israel and the house of Judah are being referenced, that's within the scope of the Old Testament, that's always referring to the inhabitants of the house of Israel, of the house of Judah, or at least the kingdoms. It's never referring to anyone other than the house of Israel and the house of Judah.
Right.
You would agree with that?
Well,
right?
Actually, no. Here we would depart because the way we interpret that is that in the first century, there were descendants who were, in large part, the entirety of the church. So the church in the, say after the death of Christ up to Acts chapter 10 is almost entirely Jewish converts. So we interpret that because if you look at Acts, I understand you don't accept this. I'm just telling you this.
Yeah, Acts chapter 2. Perhaps,
right. So Acts talks about the house. The tabernacle of David being rebuilt and restructured in the fulfillment of the church.
Right. But that's my contention is that nowhere in Jeremiah or nowhere in any of these prophets does it mention a replacement to the church or even a hint to the church.
Well, we're not. It's not a replacement. It's the fulfillment. So that's two different ideas. So replacement would be like the things that came before don't count. That's why it's a fulfillment. So it's a totally different paradigm where we're saying that all of these prophecies are fulfilled not just in the person of Christ, but who is, for example, in Isaiah, like Isaiah 53, we would say that he's the servant, he is Israel, right? So right. Jesus is the person.
Right. So if we can stick to like one prophecy, because to go jumping to.
Okay,
like,
but here's the
different
thing.
type of
So I understand what you're saying, but here's the thing about the way a lot of prophecies work, and even the way, for example, I have the Jewish Study Bible. It will admit that messianic prophecies are sometimes just sections of a chapter, not the entire chapter or the entire book. So not everything in Jeremiah 31 is necessarily part of the prediction of the new covenant. Let me give an example. In Isaiah 19, for example, it says that there will be an altar set up in Egypt, and that Egypt, Syria, and Israel, all three will be God's footstool and his people, right? So in Isaiah 19, that didn't all happen in that time period. There was a partial fulfillment, which encapsulates the whole chapter. But as far as I understand, most, I think, Jews believe that's also a messianic fulfillment towards whenever the Messiah comes. So
Right.
in the same way, I would say that there was something that occurred at the time of Isaiah 19 that related to, God's people and the Syrians and the Egyptians. But the full fulfillment awaits the Messianic era, which is what we would
same
say.
with Isaiah 45 when it speaks about Cyrus. That's not that already occurred. Within like shortly after Isaiah. So yeah, I do agree with what you're saying.
Well,
That's not
okay,
what
but what I'm saying is
the
that,
contention
right,
is.
are you saying that the Cyrus is something that was only fulfilled in the person of Cyrus, or that it also has a messianic fulfillment?
No, I'm saying it's not, and it's already. But that's not my point of contention. My point of contention. My point of contention is that every time the house of Israel and the house of Judah is being referenced or spoken about, it's always referring to the physical people, like in Jeremiah, or in like Zechariah, and it says they will be
Well, I
restored.
just disagree. I disagree that every time it's that. It's
On what scriptural basis within the frame of the Old
because
Testament?
Israel was always the true believers in God and not just the physical descendants.
You see, the issue here is that you're bringing external interpretation, which is
No, but
fine,
see,
'cause you're
everyone
Christian.
does that. You do the same thing. It's just that you have a different
So give me an
paradigm.
example. So when I say the house of Israel and the house of Judah are always speaking about the house of Israel and the house of Judah, what sort of this is different to what you're doing by bringing the New Testament /
So
lenses into
everyone brings their paradigm to any specific text. You do it, I do it. We have different paradigms. So what you're calling out is a feature of everybody's worldview, not something that's unique to mine.
Right. That's. I do hear what you're saying, but like I said, the basis of it is that your interpretation, you would say, is based exclusively from the church.
Well, again, our paradigms will determine how it's even understood back in the old times. So, for example, did Abraham believe in a Unitarian deity, or did he believe in the Messiah? The Christian
That's not what I'm arguing.
but it's part of my argument. So I know you don't believe that. And you're not arguing that, but I'm saying that that's part of our paradigm.
Right. But I'm not trying to argue every aspect within your paradigm currently. Perhaps for another time and a different time.
I didn't think you were. I'm just giving an example of how.
Okay, no. I'm all for examples. I do examples and I do stuff. But look, every time House of Israel and House of Judah are referenced within the
Well, how do you know that? You're just saying that that's the case based on your paradigm.
Because I read it, and every time.
Oh, okay. So that's how we do it. So when I read it, and I can just say every time it presents my position. Is that how it works?
You can, if it's logical to the context of the Old Testament.
Well, but that's again going to depend.
Give me some sort of argument against my interpretation without.
Well, you just asserted that your interpretation. No, yeah, I'm giving you an argument. I'm giving you an argument. It's an epistemic argument that you just asserted that every time it is your position, and that's because that's what it says, and that's what the Old Testament says. That's just asserting your position. How do we know that every time that's the case?
Because we can look for the context and we can see when Zechariah speaks to the people.
Okay, but see, if we went with that perspective, then messianic prophecies would only be relevant to the immediate context. They would never be a future prophecy.
When did I ever say that?
No, I'm saying that.
So
it's a double. It's a
Yeah,
double
I'm saying-
standard. So if we went with your original point there, that it always only means the immediate context, then you could never have a messianic prophecy
No, that's
that is
not
a
what I
mirrored
said.
prediction.
That's
No,
not what
I know
said.
you didn't say that. That's my argument and critique of your position.
So what's my position then?
What you just said, if it was consistent, would then have to reject the notion that the messianic prophecies have an immediate and a future fulfillment.
Can you repeat my statement? What I said?
You just said House of Israel only refers to the literal physical House of Israel, right?
No, that's not what I said.
That is what you
please don't
said.
stop
What do you
me.
mean?
No, I said the house of Israel and the house of Judah.
Okay,
are always
both.
in reference. For example.
Okay, now you're just
when-
so this is sophistry. So you would just want to play word games and argue over shibboleths, right?
What do you mean I'm playing word games? You just straw man my argument, and
It wasn't a straw man. It was just
restating
restating your position. I'm not trying to.
Yes, and you said the house of Israel, but I said the house of Israel and the house of Judah are always, for example.
Okay,
when
it wasn't
Zechariah
trying to
and other
misstate your
prophets-
position.
Okay, that's fine. So let's go back to the crux of this all. So the prophecies I'm speaking about are the restoration of Israel and Judah. So this is what I'm referencing alongside Jeremiah 31 when it
I understand.
mentions. So how do you reconcile the fact that the houses of Israel and the house of Judah has not been brought together, like Ezekiel said, like Zechariah chapter 10? How do you reconcile the fact that within the time frame of the first century, in fact, the opposite happened? They were exiled instead of being returned.
Yeah,
slash restored.
just simply that the house of Israel and the house of Judah are not, in this case, literal and strictly only the physical descendants.
Can you show me that within the Old Testament? Can you give me some scriptural support within the Old Testament for that?
Yeah, like the fact that to be a true Israelite means, as Jeremiah says, your heart is circumcised, and that the physical flesh circumcision is not what makes you right with God, because many people before Abraham were right with God, like Noah.
Right, but I'm asking in terms of when the house of Israel, when the house of Judah,
Was Noah
not
made
saying-
right? Was Noah made right with God?
was Noah from the house of Judah or from the house of Israel?
Well, the point is that what makes one right with God is not the biological physical descent. That's the point.
I never said that. I just said in terms
So
of
this
the house
is-
of Israel and the house of Judah.
Right, so the
You
point that I'm making is that shows, as Paul argues, that he's correct to say that the true Israel has always been those who are believers in God from the heart, and that physical circumcision was a time-bound external symbol and not what made you right with God. So it was always
So
the
when
spiritual
Ezekiel
Israel.
speaks about, so when Ezekiel, or for example, Deuteronomy chapter 30 speaks about following the law, right, and which is in reference to Jeremiah 31, right? So, like I said, I'm just because you believe.
Yeah, but
that
like
you
so
Israel-
let, if I can go to rabbinical debates right now on YouTube, and I can find rabbis that admit that because you don't keep the law because there's not a temple, that God looks upon your good works as if that was the keeping of the law. Oh, you mean the Christian position? So you see that constantly in the rabbinic Judaism, you guys admit the very principles that we have. Another example would be that you guys admit that there's two different messiahs in the Talmud. There's Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David.
Well,
Those for you, hold on,
a second.
those for you reconcile the text that we bring up about the two comings of the Messiah. But what that shows is that at every point, you have a way to just turn it back into not recognizing Christ as the Messiah.
Look, if you want to be emotional, which you clearly are, by
Emotional? I just made you two
fine.
arguments. So now you're saying that I'm making emotional
No,
arguments.
you haven't even addressed my argument first.
Yeah, my
So
argument
let's
was
address
that.
my argument.
Again, do you want me to?
Let's come to a
No.
conclusion
So now
with my
you're
argument.
now you're getting
Don't make it
refuted
feel
because I
quite
know what's in the
cold by going
Talmud.
to other verses.
Now you're calling me emotional when I just made two different arguments to you.
You haven't even addressed my first argument.
You want me to address it for the third time? That the physical descent was never what made you a true Israelite. It was always whether you from the heart were circumcised. And so Noah was part of true Israel. That's the argument.
But that goes against Scripture 100%. When, for example,
I mean, I asked you if Noah was
Second
righteous and you
Samuel
ignored it.
says
Was
when-
Noah
when,
righteous?
they-
Was Noah righteous or not?
I'm not arguing whether Noah was righteous.
I'm arguing. I know you're not. I am.
So why you look? I
So the whole chat, dude, nobody's buying your argument. You don't want to address
First
it.
of all, if I brought an argument to the table and you want to delve into new arguments,
Do you want me to
that's
bring
your
the
argument.
so the fourth time? Do you want me to bring the argument that it was never the physical descent that made you righteous? How about that for the fourth time?
So why does the New Testament quote in Matthew chapter 1 that Jesus is the Messiah through the bloodline of David, which is genealogy, aka
Yeah, you don't
bloodline?
know that we believe that was the whole point of him being born of both Adam and Abraham and David, is to fulfill those prophecies. So that's not even an argument.
No, I'm saying that you do believe that physical / bloodline.
I didn't
is
say it had no
important.
relationship. I said it had nothing to do ultimately with what made you the true Israel. Was Job part of Israel?
I'm arguing with the house
Okay,
of
so you
Israel
don't
and
want
the house
to.
of
So
Judah.
yeah, you don't want to address the point. That's the thing.
Was Job from the descendants of the 12 sons of Jacob, aka Israel?
Was Noah part of Israel?
No. Noah came God knows how many decades or
Right,
even
and
thousands of years.
so being a biological descendant, as Acts 15 and as Paul argues, is not ultimately what made you a true Israelite.
I could concede that faith is important, but I'm not arguing whether faith is important. I'm arguing that when it speaks about the house of Israel and the house of Judah, always the references are with the physical people.
Yeah, that's
And
your
you're saying, no,
presupposition
it's
that it always only means the physical, and I'm challenging
All right,
that.
so show me a time when it doesn't then. Show me a time when the house of Israel and the house of
Noah
Judah
was made
don't
righteous
mean-
with God, and so he's part of the heavenly
Can
Jerusalem.
you
He's
show
part
me
of the true people of God.
Can you show
It's
me where
how about where Jeremiah
Noah-
himself says that to be right with God means that you're circumcised in your heart. How about that?
Is I know to be right with God. I do believe that Gentiles will come to Israel. That's not what I'm arguing. I'm arguing with the house of Israel and the house of Judah.
How
I'm
was,
not arguing
who-
with something that happened
Was
2,000 years before.
Melchizedek a priest of God?
Yes.
How is that?
Why are we jumping from
Because
first
these
century-
things disprove your presupposition that every text refers to the biological descendants, and I'm giving you multiple people who were made right with God and thus constitute part of spiritual
I
Israel.
know that. That's not what I'm arguing. I'm not arguing that you can't
Then
be
these things
righteous.
disprove your argument.
No, it does not.
How does it not?
Because Jeremiah 31 says the ancestors that I took you out of Egypt, none of the Melchizedek, nor Job, nor...
You're missing the
no-
point. The point is that
No, I'm not
spiritual
missing the
Israel.
point. No. So can you show me where in Jeremiah 31 when it says your ancestors that I took you out of Egypt? Can you give me an
So this
argument
is
how
what
that
you do.
links?
Like, you don't accept canonical holistic interpretation. You only accept what works for you in the immediate self-evident, right, interpretation of the text, right?
That's not true, because when you read Jeremiah 31,
Which is
verses
why,
1 to
right?
54,
Which is why I brought
it
up, yeah.
explicitly
So you're
mentions-
inconsistent, right? Because that's when
No,
I brought
I'm
up
not
messianic,
inconsistent.
right? So no,
Jeremiah
but
31.
you already admitted,
One second, hold
you
on a
already
second.
admitted that messianic prophecies can be immediate and future fulfillment. Did you not?
I said messianic prophecies are messianic.
So you won't
obviously
answer.
don't
Yeah, you
believe
won't
them.
answer clearly. You double talk on this.
No,
So
they
do
have
they?
no immediate
Did Cyrus
fulfillment.
have? Did Cyrus text in Isaiah have an immediate and a future fulfillment or not?
Not an immediate.
It wasn't immediate. It wasn't about. It wasn't about Cyrus.
Yes, that's what I said. Immediate, but not future.
Okay, so it's not about the Messiah.
Because the term Messiah is like,
So it has to. This is what I argued 10 minutes ago.
It's never exclusive to the son of David. The term Messiah is never exclusive to the son of David.
I'm just asking if there's a
Going
future.
back to the argument
So you won't
of
address this
Jeremiah
point, which refutes you.
31,
The refuse.
Going back to the argument of Jeremiah 31.
Yeah, I've already addressed it
says-
5 times, and you won't address
You
it.
have
So
no,
I have.
It says the ancestors, which I
Wow. Leonid. So he's admitting earlier on that there can be messianic prophecies that have an immediate fulfillment and then relate to the Messiah in the future. So that's a double principle that I'm talking about. But then when we go to his text and his example, there's no double fulfillments. That's not allowed. It only refers to the immediate historical case. Right? And if it only refers to the immediate historical case, then that was my earlier point that, well, then there's no messianic prophecies like the statements about David that also apply to the Messiah. So it can't be either or. And it can't be both and except for when he wants it to be. So that's a double standard. And when I start talking about the other examples, what does he do? He says, no, you can only talk about Jeremiah 31. You can't talk about these other examples. All right, whatever. In Isaiah 66, for example, you have the statement that there will be Gentile priests. How is that possible? Where God says, I will take some of these that are brought from amongst the Gentiles to be priests. And the Jewish Study Bible admits that this is a departure from the previous texts. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not a departure if you have the Christian interpretation, right? So here's what the note says. They say, Gentile priests serving in Jerusalem, a radical departure from Numbers, which says that only the descendants of Moses' brother Aaron can be priests. Or it is just Israelites. So even though it says Gentiles, well, let's just say it's Israelites, right? So there's the note. But there's the same text in Isaiah 61, which says very clearly, strangers will pasture your flocks, and they will be called priests of the Lord. How could a Gentile, who's obviously who a stranger is, be a pastor and a priest? Because only a descendant of Moses can be a priest, right? What does the note say? The nations will serve the Jews. The Jews will in turn serve the nations. But the text says that members of the nations will be the priests. It doesn't say that the Jews are the only priests. So here is the note explaining and giving the exact opposite interpretation of what the text says. So remember that guy said we just go with what the text says. Well, the text here says that Gentiles would be priests, does it not? And then the Jewish interpretation of the text says, well, it just means Jews will be priests. But it says that Gentiles will be taken as priests. How is that possible given Mosaic law and the Jewish interpretation? So you see what they do with the text. So ironically, they don't even believe what the actual literal meaning of the text says. And that's why Rabbinic Judaism then resorts to all of these wild speculations to make the text say whatever they needed to say at the time. And that's why Rabbinic Judaism doesn't make any sense and has two different messiahs. Messiah ben Joseph, Messiah ben David.